Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much to all the panelists for being here. As pitching is involved, you'll get 1 sentence to introduce yourself and what you do. 7 seconds, please. Yann.
So, good morning, Yann Ménière. I'm the Chief Economist at the European Patent Office, and the European Patent Office is an office with 39 member states that make it possible to, with one application, to get patent protection in these 39 European member states.
Hi guys, Nina Dremelj, Managing Partner Vesna Deep Tech Fund, President of Business Angels of Slovenia and Vice President of European Business Angels.
Snježana Miliša, co-founder and owner of Merlin Hat company that is positioned between startups and investors and spent last 10 years developing Rimac automobile and becoming Bugatti Rimac.
Hello, Angela Ivanova, CEO and co-founder of LAM'ON. We are manufacturing bio-based and compostable packaging films based and raised in Bulgaria.
And hello again, Daniel Beck from the EIF, heading EIF scale-up activities.
Yes, big hand. Thank you very much, and you kept to 7 seconds. Brilliant, good role models for the entrepreneurs. Let me kick it off with maybe giving some context. You heard a couple of things, so we may actually go against what you've already heard, which is always a good thing. So the fundamental question is why is deep tech funding different from traditional VC? Is it actually true, or is that just a misconception? I think some of the key differences that we always hear is the longer development cycles. However, one could argue that a lot of that is covered at research institutions. Usually there is also a bit of a higher capital intensity at the earlier stage, like, for example, healthcare investments. There are certain similarities there. And one thing that always comes up is I think, the longer commercialization cycles. Having said all of that, and we heard, I think, the numbers before, when you hear this, you could probably say, well, that's probably a crappy investment if you go into deep tech. However, it's quite a misconception. Several studies, and depending which one you read, numbers differ slightly, but there are clear indications that over the last 20 years, funds that focused on deep tech investments outperformed classic tech funds. So, hearing this, and now looking at you, Angela, because it's about founders here, if we hear this, is it a misconception? So how easy was it for you to get funding?
Well, it wasn't easy at all, actually. If it wasn't for certain accelerator programs, we actually couldn't go to the position to actually pitch in front of VCs. There are misconceptions. The risk and the return of investment is very much slower, actually, than other software developments or different types of other companies. When it comes to the entirety of overall, I think that the misconception of the timeline, the patience that a VC has to have of a deep tech company is different, and they actually need to think more of a follow-on investments as well, which is something that they neglect.
Got investors on the panel. How do you see that?
I would say that maybe we should think about what the Europe looks like when it comes to the investing in deep tech, because we are quite unique. So we do have a public grants that are quite popular, that are, let's say, classical stuff in Europe, which on the other side there's at least so many public grants available for early stage deep tech startups worldwide. So Europe is unique in that stage, which on the other side brings to the stage that VCs are not interested to invest in early stage. Why would they be? And then the startups are issuing the problems and having the problems with funding at the early stage, where actually the most important part of funding is needed for the deep tech startups. So this early stage TRL 3 to 4 to 5 needs to be also covered with not just public money, but private money. And I think we have to change this perspective and educate also investors that you should be there at early stage, capture deep tech startup, and then carry on with the following investments. On the other side, I think that Europe is changing. There's more capital available. especially because Corona made us quite a huge favor. It shows that deep tech is now top niche to invest in. We can be fast. We can do whatever took 30 years before to develop. Now it took us 1 year to put it on a market, which is like crazy stuff. But we succeed, and this was actually the push forward for the deep tech funding and financing on the both sides. So I would not be so negative, but it's still hard.
Daniel, I see you have the mic and you want to say something. Go ahead.
I do. I think on the slide, and I'm not stepping into your back now, I hope, but I think on the slide what is missing is also the expertise. Because I think if you look at the ecosystem overall, the ecosystem has been built from and you saw it on the slides earlier with the ecosystem map, it has been built as a generalized ICT or life science ecosystem. You didn't see that many specialized investors, and I think one of the, I would say, hinderers of access to funding is actually the fact that many of the venture teams do not have the specific expertise for deep tech companies in their funds. So I think this is maybe something that is one of the hinderers.
Thank you. Yann?
Yes, I fully agree. As a patent office, we see a strong overlap between deep tech and patent. Not all startups with patents are deep tech, but probably all deep techs have a patent. And on this basis, we have been tracking actually investors in these kind of startups. And what we see is in line with what you say. Most funds have at least one startup in portfolio with a patent, but only about 8% of them have more than half of the startups with a patent. And interestingly, the proportion is the same in Europe and in the US. The difference between Europe and the US is that in Europe they are mostly early stage, and in the US they are more late stage, which is why the EIF is very important.
I mean, to your point about the lack of specialized expertise, you, Snježana, with your experience in scaling deep tech, where do you see the role of organizations like the ones you were part of in that context?
Regarding the experts, so in the early stage, let's say when we start developing Nevera, because I was leading the development of Nevera from the beginning, this development part, building the first prototype, first working prototype was not such a big issue. It was hard, it was not easy, there were a lot of mistakes, a lot of wrong ways and a lot of corrections, but we managed to have it. But the biggest pain, and where we missed the most knowledge and where we really struggled to find the real experts was the part when we need to put this first working prototype to the market-ready product. That's the thing where really things get hard. And just like a comparison, just that you understand, when I look the complete process of development of Nevera, this portion to build the first prototype is only 10% of all the cost and all the timeline. All the rest is the effort really to make all the industrial validation, all the certification, and all the production readiness. That's the biggest bottleneck, and that's the area where we miss experts here in Europe.
I think that's a great point about this later part and the scaling part. So going back to funding, how can we address this? And maybe it's already being addressed, but it's not well known. Angela, in your case, you will eventually also go through that phase. Do you know what to do and who you're going to have to talk to when you've got to raise your big round?
Yes, of course. Well, gladly we are backed up by the EIC Accelerator. There are a lot of talks currently regarding co-investment with another industry leaders. So in that sense, this is very much of a push when it comes to the so-called follow-on investments. It is super crucial that the co-development of different technologies should be actually harmonized with the industry as well. And the industry should have to be able to lead the way as well, not only wait for certain regulations or pushes from the EU.
Yeah, if I may add maybe how we've done it at our fund. So it took us 4 years to actually put together the fund. It was quite long for a VC fund, but what was the point behind was that actually we are a technology transfer-based fund, which means whatever comes from research and public institutions and is then transferred into the company, so meaning spin-offs or spin-outs, is our sweet spot. And we didn't have any ecosystem available for our fund to support the fund. Because in the end, you have to understand, VC fund is there to make a profit. So they are not there to give the support to, I don't know, be technical support, to have the best expertise. They have to bring the money on the table back to the investors, which is the basic line. But if you want to support deep tech startups, you have to create the whole ecosystem around the fund. And what we've done, we actually created the best advisors from niche expertise, not just from the region, but worldwide. We created the Rolodex of so-called entrepreneurs in residence. Maybe it's not the right expression, but people who are ex-entrepreneurs, successful ones, make the exit, or they are still entrepreneurs and they have time. But the point is they are willing to jump on a train when each of our portfolio companies needs specific help to become part of a team for a certain period. And then we created the industry partners. We actually build them around our fund in a way that if there's a case, can you offer sandbox, access to the channels, pilots, whatever is needed. Again, different sectors, and so on, which means that you actually need to put your company on the value chain of development, and you actually have every block covered.
That sounds, I couldn't agree more. Having said that we still realize at one point there is a shortage in funding in Europe. Once we're talking about, larger rounds, up of 50 millions and plus, is there a gap, or is this where actually the solutions are there, but we're not really, aware of them?
Yeah, I wanted to add an additional dimension to the discussion, which is private markets, private fundraising is per se always opaque. It's opaque in Europe, it's opaque in Asia, it's opaque in the US. If you look at the number of instruments that we have at disposal in Europe, be it the EIC that was mentioned, be it the direct investment side at the European Investment Bank, be it the venture debt activities of the European Investment Bank, be it our own funds, I think one of the major problems that we have is, and that there we as European institutions, as public institutions need to get better, is bringing more visibility to that market. Because I think for a good company should be able to see right from the start which are the funding resources that are at disposal throughout Europe, and not be handicapped by the fact that maybe they don't have the best connections to one or the other VC. So overall, we need to work on making this ecosystem more transparent, and I think this would give us an edge over all the other ecosystems out there.
I completely agree with everything that you said, but there is also the reality. We in Rimac in the beginning took the IRI project and we got 7 million grant. And in the end, Mate needed to go around the world to search for additional investment, because that grant came only after we paid and invested that money. So it is help in some way, but it's really, and also the administration work, the level of administration that was needed is so high that in one moment we were really on the edge really to say, we will not use it, really. So just to explain.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And if I may add to that, there's not a problem that there's enough money in Europe, if you ask me. The problem is how we distribute this money. We're too slow. We are so complicating our lives with bureaucracy, with AML, with KYC, just name it. I'm not saying this is not existing everywhere else. It does, but it's simplified. Which means if you have a good startup case, deep tech or not, it doesn't matter, but especially in deep tech, on your table, you are freaking out to lose it. And now if you will have any kind of public grant behind who will take 1 year to decide all the due diligence, we are too slow. We can't even react as a fund. Not mentioning that we have to be also organized, we have to follow the rules, we do have a process that takes some time. We can be even too slow. And you are in fear to lose the great case, and the good cases will get money too fast, in many cases for many funds. So what we have to prevent is, what we have to do is simplicity of the processes, of the bureaucracy on EU level. fast application, KYC done, eligible not, that's it. And then reporting should be with KPIs, how this can reflect to the commercialization, not if the money was spent for this, I don't know, 2 FTAs, blah, blah, blah. It's a bullshit. And this is what we are doing. So we have to simplify the process on EU level, because Europe is lacking behind because we are not agile.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I think that's a perfect segue to the next block I'd like to cover. I mean, funding, we'll always get back to it, but what other bottlenecks do we have we heard, we've got fantastic research institutions. We obviously have access to lots of grants. The EIF is doing a lot to also, blend this public-private funding, trying to get more transparency into the market. But what are the other blocking elements that we have out there in Europe, and how could we address them?
If this goes to me, I can.
No, it's for everyone.
I can at least start with the LP perspective on this. We were hearing where the problems lie, and on the bureaucracy part, I don't have to particularly comment because I feel it myself. On the other hand, this is also nothing that I have in my remit to change. I think what we see is that specifically for deep tech projects, and it comes a bit from this wave of green technology, climate technology companies that we have seen over the last years. That's what actually brought deeper technologies again back to the forefront, which is a very positive thing. But the one problem we see is, how do we scale those technologies? Scaling is really one of the huge problems that we have for deep technologies in general, and I think for this, there would need to be a rethink when it comes down to LP investing. Yeah? Large private institutions, pension funds, we would actually need to get them into those funds, backing with patient capital those companies over the longer term. I think it was also one of your questions. I think this is a real problem. We need to make sure that funding does not only go into the hyped type of strategies, but that it also goes into maybe more developmental, but more strategic topics, like the ones that I have mentioned earlier, be it now in the AI space, in the quantum space, in use space, in defense, or other generalized deep tech topics. Yeah,
Indeed, but let's be honest, sometimes it's even hard to communicate your own development and your own startup in a business way. So there has to be more and more communication and translation of the development and of the insight of whatever you are, the innovation that you are building. So in that sense, founders themselves need to learn to communicate their innovation better in order to be able to say how they will actually scale it, because the risks remain. Whether or not this will actually be able to scale and sail, it is oftentimes we cannot communicate that correctly with fundings, with EICs, with EU and VCs for sure.
Communication is a good point, which brings me to the question about, do we have enough of the right relevant talent in Europe? I mean, I think science-wise we're pretty up there, but as we know, commercialization is very often an issue. And is this a question of talent? Is it a question of regulations? What's your take on that?
I don't think we lack talent, but we need to bridge better the communication. How? Between, well, there are programs, test beds, and a lot of actually timelines on, again, speaking from the part of EIC, as a programs to teach actually scientists and business developers to communicate better in order to actually present something on the market. And I believe that this is going somewhere for the past year for sure.
And I already said in the beginning that for us in Rimac, that was the biggest issue, from the working prototype to scale the production to came to something that we can offer on the market. And we really face the issue that we are really missing the experts that are familiar, that have knowledge to put really the serial production, really to ensure that we can produce the same product in same quality, with the same functionality.
What needs to be done to attract these people? Because there are, I mean, other places in the world, things work quicker, to your point. You can find these people. So what do we need to do to attract these people?
I think that the basic starts with respecting those people and keeping them at home, or on the other side to invite the others from outside to come to Europe. Because currently what we are doing, we don't cherish those people, we don't respect them. We easily leave them to go outside to make themselves better life, to be actually respect and to actually gain the great achievements. And on the other side, we again to complicate all the processes to attract the talent back to Europe, with taxation, with, I don't know, just to move here and become a resident, with opening a bank account. So simple stuff, but here we are, this is Europe. I think that when it comes to the talent in Europe, we're not lacking of it, we're just not channeling it right. Which means that there's not full life cycle. I agree, there's an issue with scaling, there's an issue with industrialization, but this is because everything in Europe is fluffy. Like, you should do that, it's recommendation, but it's not obligation. When things become obligations, like also for industry partners, for pension funds to become investors in venture capital, etc., this will be a game changer. And this is something we didn't achieve, the others made it in a better way, anyhow.
Yann, you want to react to that?
Yes, just to make the connection with the regulation. So I would say that we invest a lot of expertise and talent in managing complexity, perhaps too much, because we have too much complexity. And one example from our world of patents, so we created 2 years ago the unitary patent, so one single patent for the single market instead of a collection of national patents. And that simplifies a lot, actually, and that's super popular with startups. Actually, it's really taking off with startups, with SMEs, because it's simple, and practically it's a catalyst for transactions. So until now, you needed an expert to assess a complicated portfolio of patents across different countries, different legal regimes, different litigations, etc. So you need less expertise, less resources to manage that now. And you can focus on something else. And this is just one example of the regulation in the system in Europe, but I think in the argument that we need less regulation, it also makes the point that it does not mean we need less regulation at the European level. We need more harmonization at the European level and less differences between the countries, in fact.
Thank you for bringing that up as a positive example where things should go. Do we see other fields where this is happening or this is encouraged, this harmonization? Because I think Europe is kind of usually criticized as being, very centralized and everything. But the truth is it's quite different on a certain extent. And this seems to be exactly in the right direction. So how can we use this example maybe to apply that to other fields? Because it seems to be possible.
I think there is a general motivation on a European Commission level, at least, to harmonize, for example, via the CMU, the Capital Markets Union in the past, which did not really quite get somewhere until today. Now there's actually a new push to it, now called Savings and Investment Union. I think on that level, there is a real push to harmonization. The strength of Europe as one single financial market has been perceived as one of the major construction sites that we have in Europe. And at least on our level, we start to feel that there's a vibe to push for harmonization, also coming from the national countries, the national governments. So I think there is a wish.
Maybe let me just focus on the last point you made about the capital markets. One issue that we have is, obviously, for us VCs, exits are important at one point, right? And in Europe, I don't know how many IPOs you have per year of startups, right? It's probably close to zero. I'm exaggerating. So is that also something that should be encouraged, to have a centralized, unionized stock market, where the hurdles, barriers, and I'm not saying it should be the Wild West, but I think that's more simple to encourage that avenue as well, and keeping the companies still in Europe. Because what most of the startups that I'm aware of that went public, most of them go to the US.
So I would say that when it comes to maybe to go back to the harmonization, this initiative EU Inc. is actually a really cool one, because we will put together hopefully the base, or let's say the touch point for the all innovation companies in Europe, having the same shape like LTD, having the ease of having the different solutions, which is finally something that is harmonizing the whole market in EU. But secondly, the market cap is, the issue is with exits that we don't have even secondaries, not even mentioning IPOs. But the problem is the full life cycle. And again, why startups goes out, especially in USA and now MENA region? Because the capital is moving there fast again. So we have to be faster when implementing our solutions or our funding into the startup life cycle. This is the harmonization of the EU market. And we have to keep technology at home, not just be so generous and already sell the patents and moving the companies in wherever you want at the seed stage, because there's no funding for them here. That's our problem. On the other side, where the harmonization can happen to reflect on IP, I think that we do also have in Europe an issue that investors do not trust in investing in IP. They don't see it as an asset. Whereas on the other side, in USA, Asia, IP means something. You can actually have much more valuable company because you know how to do your IP strategy along with the management strategy. And here is the key in Europe, because we are the leaders when it comes to the IP. We just don't commercialize it in respectful manner. So
I couldn't have asked for a better transition. IP is a very important topic in tech, but particularly in deep tech. And as you just said, if you look at the rankings, Europe is always, at least when you look at the patents, really good. Now, having said that, we all know patents are one thing. That doesn't mean that we'll have a product or solution on the market. So what is missing there? Yann, maybe you as the overseer of the patent world in Europe.
So first point, indeed, so thanks for raising the point. I definitely agree. Good news, I mentioned the study we have conducted. So what we see in the data is that startups with IP, with patents and trademarks are more likely to raise funding, 10 times more likely if you have a bundle of trademark and patent. And also that investors that bet on these startups are more likely to exit successfully. So it works, actually. And that's a message worth spreading. Then, it was said already, I think it's not just a case of ticking a box of filing a patent or a trademark. You have to think it through, do it well. You will be facing these 8% of investors who know the drill and we are able to read your IP strategy. So it's important to have a strategy and to have a strategy that is aligned with your business strategy. So for me, that's the main point, actually.
Lots of founders, are rightly so to an extent a bit paranoid about their secret sauce, their invention, and there are two elements there. One is the transition or the translation from academia then to a startup, and the second part is the one where you have interaction between startups/founders and the industry, and how do you see, maybe Angela there, you interacting with the industry? What does IP play a role there, and what's your position on that?
Well, we are actually currently ongoing finalization of USA and European patents. I realize that this is an incentive when it comes to the investors, more or less. And of course, when it comes to expanding to different markets and partnering up and potentially licensing. So in that sense, I realize that it's a good thing to have, but I'm still in the should we or should we not? Because it's very capital intensive as well. We have quite a few recipes, let's say, so should I invest in this more rather than market strategies and execution of such things that actually have the faster outcome for us? Or should we just have this IP strategy, which I realize is very crucial and important. So in that sense, it's very nice to communicate with experts in this field to see when is the exact crucial point for you to start actually building the IP strategy, and when you should actually put it away for a second and focus on the go-to-market and team building even.
Reactions to that about the timing of the strategy?
TRL1.
So very clear, right? Good. Maybe go ahead.
But as soon as possible, because you cannot run the deep tech company just with the management strategy. You have to think about how the IP will be connected to this management strategy, because you have to either create IP family or you will have a market approach towards the IP, which is like, okay, one market is licensing, second is I'm going to do it. Third one is partial sales of the IP in general, etc. And IP is quite huge. It's not just patents. So we have to keep this in mind, that this is like the whole asset palette of the things you can have within the company. And deep tech startups are actually leading this game when it comes to the innovation in comparison to classical ones.
Yeah, I agree with this, with IP strategy. But when you are starting, when you are in development, and I agree with you that it has to be taught in the beginning, really to incorporate in all the plans. But in the reality, you really don't have time, because all the invention that can be, where you can get some patent and some IP rights, requires, again, engineering time, the guys that are really needed for development of the product. So it's always, you are waiting. What is more important, really to apply for the patent or really push the development? And also this is the additional element is the cost, because you need additional money for this, which you can also use for development. That's why in the Rimac, the reality was that we had a lot of things that we could patent it in the beginning, but we didn't have time or money, and we only started, I think, in 2020, we got the employee that was the lawyer for the IP rights, and then we started to do it properly. But in the beginning, it was really hard.
You did it. That's the point.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe one word about tech transfer, right? Again, we've got all the great research institutions, lots of very enthusiastic founders. How are we doing in Europe when it comes to fostering this transition from academia, so basically from the lab to the bedside, for lack of a better analogy? And I know that the IF also fosters these tech transfer initiatives. Where do we stand here in Europe?
Now, I must admit, I'm not a real specialist on our tech transfer activities, but as such, the EIF has been always very vocal to foster this part of the ecosystem. We were very actively engaged with a number of universities, TTOs, that actually eventually then got together with funds, where, be it now on a very formal level, or sometimes just getting real deal flow from the universities without a formal level. But TT has always been in our focus. For many years, I would say at least for 10 years. We continue supporting this. On the other hand, what we also see is that we are increasingly getting into a situation where we have more and more what they call pre-seed fund managers that are tapping into the TT part of the ecosystem, that are tapping into really getting the translation done from science to commercial. And I think what is happening, and that is actually a very positive element in the ecosystem, is that those two TT funds versus pre-seed funds, they start to merge together as a concept. So I think that even if I don't see the huge number of new TT funds pushing to the market, even if there are national initiatives, if there are government and university initiatives, I still see that more and more VC players actually get interested into these kinds of companies. So I think there is a kind of a natural thing that is happening there.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. To follow up on that, so we are, since last year, we have been monitoring what we call academic patents, so the patents that are not filed by universities but invented in universities. And that actually represents 10% of patents filed in Europe, so it's by Europe, so it's quite a lot. And it has been increasing over time, so it's good news. But it's also interesting to look at the ownership of that. And in fact, the universities account for about half of the owners of these patents, and the rest is industry. And spin-out is 12%. So actually, there's a lot happening in terms of technology transfer through collaboration, contractual research between universities and industries, and it's very important to bear that in mind when talking about technology transfer. So spin-out startups can do a lot, but they cannot do everything. And it's really important also to involve industry and universities in collaboration at an early stage, because this is how you build on the long term, how you build joint capacity, how you build IP also with the money of the industry that you can then leverage for startups, spin-outs, etc.
Yeah,
And just one point there. So we talked about national differences. So in that respect, you have a lot of national differences. And actually, the countries that are doing best in terms of impact of university innovation are in the north. And they are really not aggressive in terms of IP ownership. So they let the industry file the IP and manage the IP. And that seems to work better.
Another field for a bit of harmonization or gentle push towards harmonization. Snježana.
And I just wanted to say it's really important to find someone from industry, really to find a partner that will join the company. Like we had the luck, or Mate was enough convincing to get the Porsche, Kia, Hyundai on board with us. And with that, we also convinced other investors, venture funds, to invest in the company. So that's really big.
Thank you. Anything else? A panel wouldn't be a panel if we couldn't have the audience jump in. So I'd love to open the floor for a few questions, also being mindful of the time. So please, if you have any burning questions, I'm sure there is a mic somewhere in the room. Or shout elsewhere. And it's hard to see if... Oh, but I can't read them. Oh, okay. That's a comment. Don't sleep and work on your IP strategy. Okay. We have open EU calls for 60K to develop TRL7 in AI. However, with 60K, it's difficult to achieve much. Larger calls fund projects instead of startups and require big consortiums. What are your thoughts on funding big tech this way?
Okay, can I jump?
Sure.
So I think that this is like making more harm than good work, these small grants, because those ones are not meant for the deep tech, they are for classical startups, because 60K can make a difference if you are B2B software, something that can be easily put on a market in 6 months. But for the deep tech, 60K is like a budget to make a spin out. Clearly, just to create a company and move the team. Which means then we are without everything. So you can just finish lab prototype, nailing it a bit, and then go into the spin out. Which means that the deep tech needs to be proportionally much more heavily funded, but it also have to be differently organized, because deep tech goes like, it's a straight line for a long time, then it goes up. There's no hockey stick. It cannot be, it's a different development. And on the way of where there's a narrow line, you have to put either public or private money in the right way with the right portion to actually make the next step that is visible. With 60K, nothing is visible.
These programs are out there. Is there also a strategy in the EU to address exactly that point? I don't know, Daniel, if you are aware of these things there?
I think,
we're back to money, so that's why I'm looking.
The 60K kind of tickets, that is actually covered by what I was talking about earlier, be it now TT fund initiatives or pre-seed fund initiatives. But those are the experts in the end. Yeah, they would actually need to comment on that, not us.
And I think one question goes towards what we talked a little bit about, having still a lot of people remaining in the labs and being basically afraid of becoming entrepreneurs. And the idea here is to say, how can we foster this translation, right? And maybe Angela there, what actually motivated you to do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not coming from the laboratory type of when it comes to our company, but for sure I think something that can be done is for EU to present some programs that can actually show scientists what it's like to be an entrepreneur. How can you actually mirror your knowledge and your overall motivation and in the market. I had the privilege to actually find a scientist that can and was willing to work with us, but that's not a common thing. So EU should present more programs, I think, for entrepreneurship in universities and laboratories as well.
Not my area of competence in either, but I would say I would also see that duty at the level of the universities. They have those fabulous scientists in their research centers. They also need to prepare them for those that have the best fit for way or path to the outside. And I think they would probably be, from a subsidiarity philosophy perspective, they would be best placed to actually prepare their own scientists for such a path.
It's education of the scientists, because when we done the interviews, many of them, there was not an issue, they don't want to be entrepreneurs, they didn't know how. So you have to equip them with tools and jigs so they will be capable to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why it's important for universities to think in terms of platforms, so platforms of capabilities with some academics that do not have the vocation to do into business, but that's fine. They can work on this platform, and that's a platform to interact with the industry and to attract young talents, some of whom may be willing to spin out, for instance.
Yeah, and just to add, there is really great example in Zagreb. It's Nucleus. It's incubator for the really technology transfer, and they are really working with scientists and helping them to create this product out of their idea. So I think more such examples really could help on the Europe level.
Good. Maybe before I get to the last point, just short summary. I think the good news is that there is a lot of good things that have already been put in place, various initiatives. I think the word harmonization was used in quite a few things. Probably on the funding side, that's where I see that the world is quite advanced already. You mentioned this IP harmonization, right? Which could be used again as a positive example, because we're really good in Europe always at finding the bad things. But I think using these positive examples to push the harmonization forward is a really good thing. I think lowering the barriers for commercialization, harmonizing regulations. I think, Angela, you told me before that depending on which country you are, you have to basically go through the whole loops all over again, which obviously is not the idea of a unified market. So we talked about the unified capital market. The role also of the universities, clearly there to foster, not just through very efficient tech transfer, probably also slightly harmonized, but having these programs for future entrepreneurs, and that's clearly something. I would argue, because I've been part of that environment, we should also be careful there not to reinvent the wheel too often. There are some very good models, and we should try to share these best practices and maybe also consolidate some of these things that happened. I think the time of chaos and mushrooming was important, but maybe we should also start a bit consolidate and harmonize more on that angle. And last but not least, fast forward, it's Christmas. You have a wish list. If there is one wish you would have to, put on top of the list, what would it be to make sure that we are not missing the train in, I believe, this huge wave of deep tech where Europe can be at the very forefront? And please, just shout. One wish. Hopefully 5 different ones.
So I will jump again on the growth stage financing train. My wish would be that if we want to build European deep tech champions, we need to make sure that growth stage funding, specifically on supranational or on levels that are having public resources, comes from a concerted action rather than individual government action. If we want to stand firm against other blocks in the world, we need to make sure that we are standing up as one Europe.
Thank you. Angela?
Yeah, and synchronize policies and market.
I could wish that every deep tech startup find a good industrial partner that could be his first customer so that they can do the pilot with them.
Thank you.
You said it's a Christmas, so Europe is leading the deep tech worldwide. Exits are the best in the world, and every startup in Europe is successful in deep tech.
That may be Christmas 2020.
It's a wish.
8 or something, but yeah, thank you.
I'm going to hijack the question a bit. So we have created and published a tool online free called the Deep Tech Finder at the EPO, where you can find more than 10,000 startups, 900 universities with European patents, and you can search their patent portfolio, search them by technology, and we eliminate them once they are mature. And so my wish is that after implementing all these recommendations, we have a high turnover on that tool, and you can consult it on dtf.epo.org.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much all for a great panel, very lively panel. Thanks to the audience as well for the questions.